Thank you very much for the moderator for the kind introduction. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, in this session, I will discuss about my presentation entitled Inorganic Nanoparticle as Next Generation UV Filter Enhancing SPF Performance in Sunscreen Formulation. Next slide. Okay. Okay. In the first slide, we know that the sunlight is important for our body, especially to produce the vitamin D and boost the immune function. But we know that the sunlight contains ultraviolet radiation, and it is divided three: ultraviolet, UVA, UVB, and UVC. We know that the UVA is characterization deep thermal penetration and cause the photoaging, oxidative stress, and like to melanoma. And UVB, with the biological effect can erythema, DNA damage, and the UVB can produce the vitamin D synthesis. And UVC, we can know that the generally does not reach the earth surface. UVA, UVB, and UVC, this is harmful to the skin, so we must protect our skin using the sunscreen. Next slide. We know that the sunscreen can absorb, reflecting, and scattering of the UV radiation, and the sunscreen divided in synthetic and natural sunscreen. The synthetic divided two class: organic sunscreen and inorganic sunscreen. Organic sunscreen contain an aromatic ring combined with functional group that act as electron donor and acceptor. The molecule structure facilitates electron delocalization upon UV exposure and enabling effective absorption to ultraviolet radiation. And this is the example of the organic sunscreen: oxybenzone, butyl methoxydibenzyl methane, ethyl hexyl triazone. And the function of the organic sunscreen is UV absorber and broad spectrum UV radiation. And the second is inorganic sunscreen. We know that zinc oxide and titanium dioxide are two types an inorganic filter certified by the FDA. Both are metal oxide that function to absorb, reflect, or scatter electromagnetic radiation. Inorganic filters are non-toxic, hypoallergic, and not easily degraded physically. But the use of inorganic filter often leave a white residue on the skin surface, which can be an aesthetic concern, especially for individuals with dark skin tone. So, to solve the problem, we can use the nano sunscreen. What is the nano sunscreen? Nano sunscreen is UV filter incorporated into nanosystem. Compared with traditional sunscreen, the nano sunscreen provide better UV protection and offer enhanced cosmetical acceptability and ensure control and sustained release of active ingredients. And the benefit of nanotechnology in sunscreen can transparency and aesthetic, comfort and cosmetic appeal, and enhance protection. The mechanism of photo protection, UV radiation via inorganic, organic, and nanoparticle sunscreen. We know that physical sunscreen can provide shock absorption, reflection, and scattering, and chemical sunscreen protection provide shock UV absorption, property of active ingredient, and nano sunscreen can protection mainly provide shock absorption, reflection, and scattering. Okay, in this section, we focused in organic nanoparticle. Why in organic nanoparticle? Because in organic nanoparticle is hydrophilic and biocompatible with the body, stable and non-toxic, lower risk of irritation, itching, and allergy reaction compared with organic nanoparticle and easy modified surface. This is allow a wide range of formulation and lower production cost. This is example of inorganic nanoparticle. The first is titanium dioxide. The function is UVB blocker, but the titanium dioxide have additional benefit, non-toxic, and stable. The second is zinc oxide. The function in sunscreen is UVA and UVB blocker, and the additional benefit is antimicrobial and soothing. And the third is silver nanoparticle. The function is UV absorber and antibacterial. The additional benefit is antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. And the fourth is silicon dioxide, enhancer and stabilizer, improve texture and SPF for the additional benefit. And the last is gold nanoparticle. The function in sunscreen is skin rejuvenation, and the additional benefit is anti-aging and antioxidant. Okay, when we talk about nanoparticle, maybe we confuse that it's difficult to produce the nanoparticle, but it's a simple for the synthesis of nanoparticle. The synthesis nanoparticle divided to rows. The first is bottom-up approach and the second is top-down approach. The bottom-up approach divided in conventional method and biological method. And the focus of the session is biological method with plant extract. The example of the synthesis of zinc oxide nanoparticle, we have the zinc nitrate solution, and we have the extract from the plant. We mix the extract and zinc nitrate at 60 until 90 derajat Celsius to produce the nanoparticle, and then the nanoparticle, the characterization for SEM, FTIR, XRE, data potential, and the particle size. And this for the sunscreen, we can the assessing UV protection with three ways. The first is UV index. The UV index is an indicator of the strength of ultraviolet radiation from the sun, which fluctuated throughout the day and peak between 12 and 30 p.m. In this picture, we can know that the UV index 1 until 2, no protection required. So you can stay outside safely. In the UV index 3 until 5, if medium, you must protection. Wear the sunscreen and hat and seek shade midday. And the UV index 9 and 6 until 7, mask protection essential. Wear sunscreen, a hat and long sleeves, and seek shade midday. And the UV index 8 until 10, extra protection required. Seek hat, avoid being outside midday, long self-short, and sunscreen and hat needed. And the extremely high 12 plus stay indoor. The second method is sun protection factor or SPF. SPF is an indicator of the UVB resistant performance of sunscreen in a formulation. UVB radiation in the main cause of sunburns, skin tanning, and skin cancer. The higher the SPF, the stronger the UVB resistant of the sun protection product. And the third is protection grade of UVA. Protection grade of UVA in is an indicator of the protection performance of sunscreen toward UVA. This kind of radiation in the main cause of skin aging, wrinkles, and skin cancer. The PA index is evaluated by the number of plus sign. The more marks given for a product of formula, the higher the protection performance that the formula provides. So if you have a product with SPF 10 and PA plus 1, you must application the sunscreen 1 hours until 2 hours.
Dr. Indri, 2 minutes left.
Okay. This is the example of our research about zinc oxide nanoparticle synthesis using sungkai leaf. We have activity of SPF in 1000 ppm, and the silver nanoparticle synthesis using vanilla leaf. The silver nanoparticle have sun protection factor at 300 ppm in 35.04. I think this is my presentation. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
So give applause for our symposium speaker. Okay. Baik, Bapak Ibu, apakah ada pertanyaan? Cukup? Jika tidak ada, gimana Bu? Kita ada pertanyaan. Oke, satu ya. Just one question nih.
Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Saya Erni dari Prodi Kedokteran. Mau bertanya kepada Dokter Fitri, Dok. Kan sekarang itu banyak ya, Dok, produk kecantikan yang mengandung peptida, retinol, asam tranexamat, niacinamide, yang untuk usia seperti saya dan teman-teman sefrekuensi saya. Karena kan ada juga yang bawah 30 ya, Dok. Yang untuk di atas teman-teman sefrekuensi saya itu yang untuk mengurangi wrinkle, melasma, dan black spot tuh yang bagusnya yang mana ya, Dok? Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Baik, terima kasih untuk pertanyaannya. Ini pertanyaannya umum banget gitu ya. Rata-rata kalau ketemu saya itu aja pertanyaannya gitu. Boleh saja tidak ada masalah ya, kita bisa membuka diskusi tentang hal-hal lain selain topik. Memang karena topiknya kosmetik in skin aging, jadi tadinya saya fokusnya ke skin aging, fokus ke peptide gitu. Tapi kalau pertanyaannya bagaimana cara memilih yang cocok, gitu kan? Gitu pertanyaannya ya, sesuai usia, benar? Ya, jadi tadi ya kalau memang saya kan tadi pada awal pembicaraan saya sudah memberikan informasi bahwa untuk memang bidang kosmetik ini beberapa orang menganggap hal-hal tertentu itu ada yang memang menjadi masalah. Ya. Ada orang yang biasa saja gitu, seperti intrinsic aging kan pada orang-orang tertentu yang tidak terlalu nampak tua sesuai usianya, hal-hal tertentu saja yang menjadi masalah. Ya. Jadi biasanya proses aging ini tidak selalu sama tahap perkembangannya. Orang-orang dengan faktor-faktor risiko yang lebih banyak itu akan memulai proses extrinsic agingnya lebih cepat daripada intrinsic aging, gitu kan ya. Kadang-kadang kita lihat ada orang usianya 30 atau 40 tapi tampak lebih tua dari orang-orang yang intrinsic aging pada usianya 40 atau 50. Gitu. Nah, dalam proses seperti itu tentu saja orang yang dengan usia yang sama belum tentu memiliki masalah skin aging yang sama. Gitu ya. Ngerti ya, misalnya pada orang umur 30 yang menjadi masalah dia pada saat itu mungkin hyperpigmentation. Tapi orang lain yang pada usia yang sama mungkin tidak punya masalah itu. Jadi kita tidak bisa memberikan solusi yang sama untuk orang-orang yang berbeda. Jadi kita harus tahu prioritas. Jadi orang misalnya untuk tujuannya apa nih? Kalau peptide yang mau digunakan, kan ini tadi saya sudah karena topiknya peptide ya. Tapi tentu saja ada banyak agen-agen pencerah namanya itu ya. Jadi kalau misalnya tujuannya adalah untuk pencerah, bukan pemutih, maka ada banyak agen-agen yang bisa digunakan. Nah, contohnya ya misalnya vitamin C, hidroquinone yang paling umum. Tapi sekarang ini kalau untuk hidroquinone itu beberapa negara sudah tidak menggunakan itu lagi. Ya karena harus tahu betul bagaimana cara menggunakan dan kapan kita harus menghentikannya. Karena efek samping yang dihasilkan itu kadang-kadang ada kondisi tertentu yang sudah tidak bisa disembuhkan lagi kecuali dengan laser gitu kan ya. Nah untuk menghindari hal itu maka sebaiknya hidroquinone tidak kita sarankan lagi untuk beberapa sentra ilmu. Tapi ada yang masih menyarankan untuk memakai itu tapi harus tahu kapan harus menghentikannya dengan cepat. Kedua resorcinol gitu ya, bisa dengan azelaic acid, bisa dengan sekarang ini lagi ngetren adalah tranexamate acid ya, itu kan produk-produk pencerah yang banyak sekali digunakan yang kadang-kadang bisa ditemukan sendiri atau dia kombinasi dengan beberapa hal. Contohnya dengan ini tadi. Walaupun murni peptide, tapi kan peptide ini kombinasi ya antara sinyal peptide dengan neurotransmitter peptide gitu kan. Jadi beberapa produk bisa dikombinasikan jadi satu. Misalnya untuk usia 30 saat ini dokter Erni keluhannya apa? Kerutnya atau hiperpigmentasinya gitu kan. Itu jadi kita harus lihat dulu per orang. Ini orangnya datangnya keluhannya apa? Fokus ke situ dulu. Itu jadi bahan aktif yang akan kita berikan terhadap orang ini adalah pada saat ini keluhannya apa? Apakah hiperpigmentasinya? Apakah kerutnya? Apakah tujuannya ingin pencerah gitu kan? Itu tujuan utama. Itu bahan aktif yang akan diberikan. Tentu saja bahan-bahan pelindung lainnya itu akan diberikan bersama-sama. Misalnya nih Bu Indri, dia kan punya UV, sunscreen kita kenal kan? Sunscreen ini itu bisa digunakan bersama-sama untuk pemakaian hari-hari. Begitu juga moisturizer. Ya, jadi setelah kita memberikan bahan aktif, misalnya pengobatan aktif untuk hiperpigmentasi, misalnya kita gunakan vitamin C atau tranexamic acid, maka berikutnya yang kita gunakan itu adalah pendampingnya. Ya, jadi kalau misalnya kita temukan orang ini lebih kulitnya itu lebih kering, maka pendampingnya akan kita berikan moisturizer, gitu ya. Atau kita berikan pendamping dalam bentuk serum ini peptide misalnya. Peptide kan itu lebih aman daripada agen-agen pencerah dan konsentrasi yang tinggi. Jadi ada agen pencerah itu hanya kita gunakan malam. Kenapa? Karena dia akan menjadi merah kalau ada efek fotosensitif namanya. Jadi kalau kita berikan dia pada siang, kita akan ada keluhan merah. Jadi biasanya kita berikan malam bahan aktif dengan konsentrasi yang tinggi. Kemudian kita bantu dengan siang. Siang itu dengan moisturizer, itu dia peptide gitu kan. Kemudian dibantu dengan UV protection. Gitu, ya. Menjawab enggak nih Dokter Erni? Nah, itu kombinasi. Wah, itu extrinsic aging pasti. Orangnya mungkin kurang tidur, banyak masalah gitu ya, stres gitu ya. Jadi sangat aduh ya, extrinsic agingnya lebih cepat gitu. Jadi kalau tiga-tiganya ya kita harus menggunakan ketiga macam produk dan dengan cara yang berbeda. Biasanya agen-agen pencerah itu kan penggunaannya malam tuh, ya. Agen pencerah itu juga memiliki efek pengelupasan itu ya. Pengelupasan itu misalnya seperti retinoic acid. Itu retinoic acid dia selain punya efek pencerah, dia juga punya efek anti wrinkle dengan cara pengelupasan. Gitu ya. Jadi kenapa dikelupaskan? Karena semakin panjang usia, proses untuk pengelupasan itu semakin lambat. Kulit kita ini sebenarnya mengelupas sendiri ya, yang mati lepas gitu, yang mati lepas. Tapi itu semakin tua proses itu jadi lambat. Yang kita lihat apa? Yang kita lihat itu mungkin jadi kusam. Itu yang sering diumumkan, yang sering dibicarakan tuh ya. Kok dok kulit kita kusam? Usianya 50, ya wajar. Gitu kan? Bandingkan dengan usia 25. Gitu kan berbeda ya. Gitu. Jadi untuk mencegah itu maka diberikan efek-efek pencerah dengan pengelupasan. Selain dia membantu mengurangi hiperpigmentasinya juga mengurangi kerutnya. Ya, bisa dibantu dengan apa? Vitamin C misalnya. Vitamin C itu kan bisa combine dia. Kalau pada malam hari ada juga produk-produk tertentu yang mengandung asam tranexamat dengan vitamin C misalnya. Itu memiliki dua efek yang berbeda. Dia memiliki efek hiperpigmentasi keduanya, kemudian memiliki efek pencerah juga dalam konsentrasi yang cukup tinggi. Ya, ya. Oke, baik, terima kasih.
Oke, thank you. Terima kasih Ibu atas penjelasannya. Bagaimana Dokter Erni? Cukup ya? Oke, ini jadinya mohon maaf. We are sorry for the limitation of the time. So, Dokter Indri mungkin kita bisa skip ya. Dokter Indri mau bertanya? Ya, Okay, yes. Since we're running out of time, we will need to end the discussion session. And for those who still want to ask question, maybe you can email Dr. Fitri and Dr. Indri personally after this session. And please allow me to take some highlighted points from today's lecture. From Dr. Fitri, where the skin anti-aging treatment, there are tropical medicine agents or topical agents, and then there are clinical effect of signal peptide, peptide, and clinical effect of neurotransmitter inhibitor peptide. And for the Dr. Indri, there are some highlighted that I've made. The first is there is two methods for assessing UV protection. That's right, Dr. Indri, which are SPF for UVB and protection grade for UVA. And for the natural compound like sungkai leaves and quinine leaf can be used as a sunscreen. Okay, on behalf of all participants, I would like to thank to Dr. Fitrianti, specialist dermatovenerologi, and Dr. Indri Maharini for the excellent and insightful topic. We wish you a great success on finding many new drugs and also for the sake of human life. Once again, thank you for your attention and participation. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let's give a round of applause for our speakers. Oke, mohon diputar videonya. Oke, and now I will return the session to the MC.
Adik koas ortopedi, minta tolong dek, bantu Ibu Fitri ini satu aja. Tolong dibagikan sama peserta ya. Satu orang satu ya, tidak boleh dua. Ada gimmick dari saya sama Bu Indri. Tolong dibagikan. Kalau lebih kembalikan ya.
Okay, thank you for the moderator, Dr. Fitrianti, specialist dermatologi, venerologi, and estetika, and Dr. Indri Maharani, Sarjana Farmasi, Master of Science, Apotheker. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now conduct a symbolic appreciation ceremony. We kindly request that the committee present the certificate of appreciation for our speakers. The first speakers is Dr. Fitrianti, Specialist Dermatologi, Venerologi, and Estetika. For the committee, please take the documentation. Okay. Countdown and 3, 2, 1. Next. Once again, 3, 2, 1. Okay, next, certificate of appreciation for our second symposium for Dr. Indri Maharani, Sarjana Farmasi, Master of Science, Apotheker. For the committee, okay, documentation 3, 2, 1. Once again, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so for the last, we have certificate of appreciation too for our moderator at first and second symposium, Dr. Fitrianingsi, Sarjana Farmasi, Apotheker, Magister Farmasi. Okay, let me count down in 3, 2, 1. Once again, 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you for our moderator and our speakers for the first and second symposium.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, next on our agenda is a plenary lecture 2, which is conducted online. This special session will be overseen by our moderator, Herwansyah, Sarjana Kesehatan Masyarakat, Master of Public Health, Doctor of Philosophy. Joining us from abroad is Peter Aldis, Doctor of Philosophy from Nottingham University. He will present on the topic Genetics of Food Preference from Mechanisms to the Real-World Behavior. To officially begin this insightful lecture, we turn over the time to the moderator. And please to the committee to share the curriculum vitae for our moderator.
Bukannya malah bikin kacau.
Once again to the committee, please help to share screen the curriculum vitae for our moderator. Okay, thank you. Mr. Herwansyah, Sarjana Kesehatan Masyarakat, Master of Public Health, Doctor of Philosophy, is a lecturer at Department of Public Health, Faculty of Medicine and Health Science, Universitas Jambi. Next. For his current education of Bachelor of Public Health, completely in July the 2009 and Universitas Sumatera Utara, continue his Master of Public Health and the University of Western Australia, Perth, Australia, and his Doctor of Philosophy in Public Health, completed in June 2024 in Maastricht University. For the recent publications, in 2023, in 2024 for research article and Journal of Healthcare Understanding Interprofessional Influence on Maternal Health Service Utilization at Community Health Centers, and several awards that has achieved that we can see together here and on the screen, such as the Asian Development Bank awardee full scholarship for doctoral degree December 2019 and until September 2023. And thank you to the committee, and please welcome to our moderator to take our discussions.
Okay, thank you for the committee for the opportunity. Apakah suara saya terdengar di layar atau di Zoom?
Ya, sudah.
Okay,
Yes.
good, thank you. Thank you. I want to check first is Dr. Peter is already here on Zoom already? I hope so. Yes, good. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon from Indonesia. Good morning to you, Dr. Peter. I understand it's morning time in the UK, so we truly appreciate you joining us today. So ladies and gentlemen, dear conference participants, colleagues, we have reached the next presentations in our plenary session. It is my great pleasure to introduce our fourth speaker for our fourth plenary sessions today at the 6th Jambi Medicine and Health Science International Conference, Dr. Peter Aldis. Dr. Aldis is a junior group leader and Nottingham Research Fellow at the University of Nottingham, where he works across the GI and liver theme, the BRC and Biodiscovery Institutes in University of Nottingham. He obtained his PhD from the University of Nottingham in 2020 and also has extensive record for publications in international peer-reviewed journals and has received multiple grants and fellowship in recognitions of his outstanding research contributions. And today he will be presenting his work on the genetic of food preference from mechanisms to real-world behavior for approximately 30 to 40 minutes, after which we will have 20 minutes Q&A sessions. Dr. Peter Aldis, the floor is yours, and you may start the presentations whenever you are ready.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen. Can you see that?
Yes, we can see your presentation on the screen now.
Okay. I can't see it. Let me just. There we go. Okay. Yeah, apologies. My camera doesn't seem to be working on the Zoom. I'm not sure why. But yeah, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon there. So thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to present today. Very excited to present some of the work we've been doing on the genetics of food preference. So really trying to understand why we eat what we do, and why we eat and drink what we do, and taking this through from understanding the mechanisms of these genetics through to real world behaviors. So I needn't tell any of you that obesity is a huge problem around the world. In the UK alone, around over 2/3 of adults are overweight or obese. And the prevalence of overweight and obesity has grown substantially since the 90s. We also have around a third of children aged 2 to 15 who are overweight or obese. And so what this means is that we're getting overweight younger and younger and earlier ages. And so we're retaining this into adulthood, and we're developing the metabolic complications and metabolic issues that we run into with obesity at a younger and younger age. And so becoming unhealthier earlier and earlier into adulthood. And so this comes at a huge cost to society. So estimates that obesity alone costs the UK around 27 billion. And we spend more in the UK on treating obesity and diabetes than we do on our police, fire service, and court systems alone, which I think is crazy when you think about it. So, of course, obesity is a complex, multifactorial disease. It's a perfect combination of our modern lifestyle, I would say, sedentary, inactive lifestyle, overnutrition, overconsumption of high calorie dense, refined processed foods, the environment that we live in, which is built for comfort and ease rather than keeping us healthy, our genetics, socioeconomic status, and of course, all of these things combine to drive cardiometabolic disease, and by extension of that, increase your risk of other diseases and health problems, such as cancer, mental health issues, osteoarthritis, etc. So if we look at the history of obesity genes, we've come a long way since the 90s when leptin and the leptin receptor, two of the main long-standing obesity genes were discovered. Sorry. We've come a long way since the 90s when leptin and the leptin receptor were cloned and discovered as associated with obesity, and these were rare mutations which drove severe obesity in children. Fast forward to where we are now, 2025, and we have around 1,500 or so obesity loci that we know of. So loads of different variants and genes that are associated with obesity, and we can now even separate these out into loci and variants that are associated with not just obesity and BMI in general, but where we store our body fat, whether that's visceral, subcutaneous, waist to hip ratio, and whether we are heavier as a baby. So there's lots of nuances to obesity and the genetics, and lots of different factors that play a role for where we store our fat, how we store our fat, when we develop obesity, etc. So I just like to show this graph when I talk about the genetics of obesity, because whilst that's going to be the focus of the talk, or genetics of food preference even, as I showed in one of the earlier slides, it's obviously very, very complex, multifactorial. And this figure is one of my favorite because it shows how genetics and socioeconomic status and deprivation really kind of really link together, and how important these factors are. So you'll see in the red bars here, the colored bars are your risk, your socioeconomic risk, so socio-deprivation scores, etc. And then the groups of these bars are your genetic risk. So you can see here that if you have a high genetic risk and you live in a more deprived area, or you have a higher socioeconomic risk score, you have a much higher risk of developing obesity and type 2 diabetes. So even though genetics plays a role, this is a really good example of how your environment can really shape how strong those genetic predictors are in your life and your health. And so another figure here just showing the heritability of obesity. So in the general population, population as a whole, it's around 40 to 50%. In what we consider healthy weight individuals, it's around 30 to 40, and heritability increases as the BMI categories increase. So if you're obese or severely obese, the heritability of obesity is far higher. And on the right here, you can see some figures from some really nice, elegant twin studies which have been conducted over the years. And so this is showing the response in twin A, in groups of twins to different dietary or physiological challenges. And so you can see here that your genetics really does predict your response to diet, to response to overfeeding, and the response to exercise. So genetics clearly plays a very, very strong role in obesity. But my real interest is in understanding why we eat and drink what we do. What is it that shapes these choices? What is it that drives us to eat calorie dense, high sugary foods when we know that they are in excess bad for us? And again, another one of my favorite figures here, because this really encapsulates all of the reasons why people choose the foods the way that they do, and choose the foods to eat that they do. So there are a whole number of factors at the individual, social, and economic level. How we feel, our beliefs, social support, what our parents tell us, work commitments, social pressures, the environment, etc. So, as many of you here will know, it's really not as simple as just saying, oh, why don't you just eat this, or why don't you just reduce this? Because there's a huge number of factors involved in why people eat the way they do, the foods they choose. But what we do know from the long list of genetic studies in obesity now is that many of the obesity associated loci map to the brain. So with the rare monogenic forms of obesity, many of these loci map to areas in the hypothalamus, and they play a major role in appetite dysregulation, satiety impairment, so something like a mutation in the leptin receptor, which regulates the MC4R POMC circuitries. This will drive very, very, very significant hyperphagia. So children who are highly motivated to eat, unable to feel full, and ultimately develop severe obesity. Whereas with the more common forms of obesity that we see in the wider population, with these common variants and polygenic forms of obesity, these typically map to regions in the brain associated with food behavior, reward, and there's a real gene environment interaction that plays a very important role here. So the mechanisms governing eating behaviors aren't just located in the brain. These are very complex mechanisms that begin as early as when we see food. Maybe we see a burger on a McDonald's poster, and that makes us hungry. That triggers reward regions in the brain. We walk past a bakery and we smell some pastries, and that triggers the olfactory system, which sends signals to these regions in our brain and makes us hungry. When we taste the foods that we eat, we have a number of taste receptors that taste sweet, salty, bitter, etc. In our tongue, which sends signals to our brain. All of these things before we've even digested and eaten our food. And then we have, of course, these post-ingestive signals as the food makes its way down to the stomach and the gut and is digested. We have these classic post-ingestive signals like GLP-1, which you'll all know of by now, insulin from the pancreas, leptin, etc. And even now there are factors secreted from the liver, something that we're also working on, a liver hormone called FGF21, which acts on the brain to regulate sugar intake. So these mechanisms that govern eating behaviors, if you think back to that map of the reasons that people choose the foods they do, at an individual, societal, and economic level. And then you go down into the biology, and it's very, very complex, and regulated by all of these different regions in the brain on the right, which control reward, learning, appetite, memory, etc. So we've been very interested over the last few years on how genetic variation in our ability to digest carbohydrates can impact food preferences, obesity, and metabolic health. Now, why carbohydrates? So carbohydrates make up a huge proportion of a standard diet, but all carbohydrates aren't equal. There are high, low glycemic index carbohydrates, refined carbohydrates. A nice figure here, which gives an example of the role of dietary sugars, and sugar consumption across the globe is typically over the recommended amounts in almost every country. And high intake of refined carbohydrates and dietary sugars are associated with diabetes, insulin resistance, weight gain, and various cardiometabolic diseases. So carbohydrate digestion begins in the oral cavity and is regulated by this family of enzymes called alpha glucosidases. So it begins in the oral cavity, where salivary alpha amylase starts to break down starch. And this continues in the stomach and the small intestine, where starch on the top right here, which is a large polysaccharide, is broken down gradually into oligosaccharides and disaccharides, and then finally into monosaccharides, glucose, fructose, and galactose. Now, we've been particularly interested in the sucrase isomaltase enzyme. So this is an enzyme on the brush border of the small intestine, which is solely responsible for the breakdown of sucrose into glucose and fructose, and also contributes to some of the digestion of maltose into glucose. Now, back in 2014, on the left here, back in 2014, there was some work that suggested that the amylase 1 gene played a genetic role in determining obesity. So this data here shows that amylase 1 copy number, so this is the number of AMY1 copies that an individual has, is associated with BMI. So the lower your AMY1 copy number, the higher your BMI. And AMY1 copy number was also associated with a class of obesity. And so at the time, it was speculated that this was because an inability or an impaired ability to digest dietary starch, or a better ability to digest dietary starch into sugars would impact the amount of glucose that enters the circulation, the amount of calories that you take on board. Whereas if you're a slower starch digester or a worse starch digester, some of these carbohydrates will probably pass through and be excreted out. And so, of course, that makes sense. And on the right here, some more recent work from 2022, I think, by colleagues in Sweden. And this really shows that individuals grouped by high and low AMY1 copy number have a very different metabolic response to high and low doses or a high and low portion of starch. So this is 40 and 80 grams of white bread that they've been given here. And you can see that their glucose curves in A and B are very different. And this is solely dependent on whether you have more or less AMU1 copy numbers. And the insulin response is also very different. So this was really kind of, over the last decade, proof of principle that genetic variation in your ability to digest carbohydrates can impact body weight and metabolic health. So as I said, we've been interested in the sucrase isomaltase gene. And so sucrase isomaltase is an enzyme, breaks down sucrose into glucose and fructose in the small intestine, and these are then absorbed. So normal carbohydrate breakdown or sucrose breakdown on the left here. At the same time, there is a rare condition called congenital sucrase isomaltase deficiency. And what happens here is this is usually diagnosed in babies post-weaning. So they're weaned onto grains and sugars, and they develop severe diarrhea, bloating, severe gastro problems because the sucrose isn't being digested and it's passing through to the colon where it's being fermented by the microbiome and producing gases and really having adverse effects on gastro function. So we were really interested in this and the fact that a number of common variants in the SI gene had been associated with IBS. So as you can see on the right here, CSID is a very rare disease across Europe, Africa, Latin America. But in the Inuit populations, the prevalence is a lot higher. And in 2015, some researchers from Canada, as far as I remember, and the Canadian Inuit had discovered a Arctic-specific sucrase isomaltase variant. And this was a total loss of function variant, which meant individuals were unable to digest dietary sucrose. Now, as you can imagine, we were particularly interested in exploring this in the context of obesity and metabolic disease. What happens? What is the phenotype of individuals who can't digest dietary sucrose? You would hope or expect that they were metabolically healthier. And so back in 2021, we published this work where we phenotyped, there's a large cohort in the Greenlandic Inuit, which colleagues in Copenhagen and Greenland have been building for a number of years now. And so we phenotyped these individuals. We had 100 individuals in the cohort in the study who had a total loss of function in the sucrase isomaltase gene. And what we saw here in these homozygous individuals was that they had a much lower BMI, they had lower triglycerides, lower liver fat, and improved cholesterol profile. And interestingly, we saw that they had a very, very high concentration of circulating acetate. So acetate is a short-chain fatty acid produced during fermentation by the gut. We then took this into our knockout mouse model. And as you can see here under the mixed diet heading, when we fed these mice a high-fat, high-sugar diet, the knockout mice gained less weight. They obviously weren't digesting the sucrose in the diet and absorbing these calories. And so they weighed less, they were metabolically healthier. There was no difference in food intake on a sucrose-free diet, as you can see in the middle. And when we gave these mice a bolus of sucrose, we saw a huge increase in plasma acetate 4 and 6 hours after they'd consumed this. So this told us that we can replicate this model in our mouse. We can increase plasma acetate in this model by giving them sucrose to eat, which isn't digested, it's then fermented. And the overarching hypothesis here at the end of this paper was that some of these, or most of these effects, are potentially driven by acetate. So this short chain fatty acid, it's a well-known, well-characterized signaling molecule that can regulate liver metabolism, liver function, has lipolytic effects on adipose tissue, regulates skeletal muscle, and can signal to regions in the hypothalamus to regulate appetite. But what we were interested in understanding then was, do these mice even like sugar? So if you take the sugar out of a high fat diet where it's very palatable and you offer them sugar alone, do they eat it? So you can see here on the left, we gave mice a choice between water and 10% sucrose in a 2-bottle preference test, and our knockout mouse drank significantly less sucrose. The same can be said for a 17% sucrose diet versus their standard chow. And you can see on the right here that if we can partially mimic this by supplementing water with acetate. So these are 3 groups of wild type mice where they have water, sodium chloride as a sodium control, and sodium acetate supplemented into their drinking water. And this is the amount of 17% sucrose diet that they consume. So if you supplement or treat a mouse with acetate, you can reduce their sugar intake. But what you'll also notice is that this isn't a huge reduction. So on the left, you'll see that, on the 2 left panels, they consume a lot less than in the knockout mouse than when you give just acetate. We also followed this up, did a more in-depth dietary analysis in the Greenlandic Inuit. And on this left panel here, you can see that the food groups that Greenlandic Inuits with a loss of function mutation in the SI gene eat less of is cakes and pastries and candies and chocolate. So this told us that they're not eating less carbohydrate-rich foods in general, they're eating less sugary foods, and specifically they're eating less refined foods with added sugars, which is typically sucrose. So they eat less cakes, they eat less pastries, candies and chocolates. And then we followed this up in the UK Biobank, who have a food liking questionnaire. So this is 140 items which participants in the UK Biobank will rate on a visual analog scale for how much they like either of all of these foods. So we group these foods into meats, fish, dairy, grains, sweets, etc. And then we grouped them by grams of sucrose per 100 grams of food. And what we saw was really nice was that liking, which is the beta estimate along the left-hand side on the left axis here. So liking, a negative beta, liking goes down, liking of foods is reduced in individuals with mutations in the SI gene as sugar content or as sucrose content increases. So this was really nice. And we were lucky enough that this got picked up by the media. We had over 300 news outlets worldwide. It was on news in the US, and I highlight this slide really because it's something that has had me reflecting a lot over the last year about this research. My research going forwards, and I think the research that we all do in general. Everybody talks about impact a lot. We're often judged on where our papers are published and the number of citations that we have. And so this was published almost a year ago to the day now. And in that year, the paper hasn't had a single citation. So in terms of citations, it's done a lot worse than all of my previous papers. But at the same time, we had media coverage across the world, and we had lots of people talking about it. And so it's definitely something for us to all think about, is what is the measure of impact that we want from our work? Is it better to have 100 citations and for nobody outside those readers to have heard of your work, or is it better to have no citations or a few citations and for people to be talking about your work and be aware of it? So the next question, as I'm sure you're all thinking, is, can we target this pathway to reduce sugar intake? Well, as it happens, there are a family of alpha-glucosidase inhibitors that have been around since the 90s. Acarbose was discovered in the 70s even, and made it into clinic in 95, I think. So these are alpha-glucosidase inhibitors. They are competitive inhibitors, so they are essentially long oligosaccharides that competitively, preferentially inhibit the enzymes in the presence of oligosaccharides or starch. So as you can see here, like the structures on the left and on the right, acarbose is essentially just a long polysaccharide. Now, these alpha-glucosidase enzymes, aside from salivary amylase, of course, which is in the oral cavity, sucrase isomaltase and MGAM were typically thought of as being expressed and found along the intestine. But this really nice paper from 2016 demonstrated that these two enzymes are expressed in the tongue. So these are also found in the oral cavity. And you can see here on the left in these images that, so these are pictures of the taste buds in a mouse, and these are co-stained with TAS1R3 antibody. So these show that MGAM and cis, or sucrase isomaltase, are expressed in taste buds, but co-expressed with the sweet taste receptor. So this really nice paper showed that these enzymes were not only present in the tongue, but they existed in sweet taste cells. And on the right here, they pre-treated the tongue or chorda tympani of mice. So this is the nerve that sends taste signals with voglibose. So this is another alpha-glucosidase inhibitor similar to acarbose. And you can see here on the top figure that treatment with voglibose dampens the nerve responses to sucrose and maltose. And what's really interesting is they then repeated this in a sweet taste receptor knockout mouse, and you can see that the response persists. So even though these enzymes are expressed in sweet taste cells and co-expressed with the sweet taste receptor, their effects on the response to sugar, the gustatory response to sugars, are independent of the sweet taste receptor. So this is really interesting because another paper published fairly recently showed in humans that acarbose has a sweet taste. So this work was done comparing glucose, maltodextrose, and acarbose, and some other sugars, if I remember correctly, at around 56 millimolar, which is less than 5% concentration. And so you can see here that acarbose has a sweet taste, and it has a sweeter taste than glucose. And we found this really interesting because when we were conducting our knockout mouse work and looking at the preference for sucrose, one of the questions we had was, do these mice like sucrose less because they can't digest it? They consume some sucrose, they develop some adverse GI effects, and then they avoid it. So we placed some of our mice in metabolic cages so we could track their intake accurately over time and really tried to figure this out. So you can see on the left with a 10% sucrose solution and on the right with 17% sucrose diet that the knockout mouse really doesn't start consuming sugar at all. They don't consume sucrose at the same rate as the wild type mice, and then their intake reduces. They don't really consume sucrose at all. So this suggested to us that something else was potentially at play. Is it because sucrose tastes different? They don't like the taste of sucrose? Is it because sucrose tastes more intense or sweeter, and so they drink less of it? And this is really what we're trying to figure out now. So we've moved into, to try and solve some of this, we've moved into the Drosophila. So some of you might think this is a backwards way of doing things, going from human genetics to mouse to flies, but the flies are actually a very, very powerful genetic and behavioral model for studying taste. So whilst they're
Peter, you still have 2 minutes left, sorry.
Sorry?
You still have 2 minutes left.
Oh, just 2 minutes.
If you want to add more something, okay, we can give you 3 minutes left, and then we continue to Q&A session.
Oh, sorry, I thought I had 40 minutes for the presentation.
Yeah,
Sorry.
30 to 40, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so the Drosophila are a great model for understanding taste. They have different taste organs, but the underlying circuitry and mechanisms with taste receptors and reward signaling is very much the same. So we are now developing models and using models to study sucrose preference in flies using these different assays, the cafe assay on the left here, and this FLIC system, this feeding monitor system here, which can discriminate between feeding and taste. And what we really want here is to identify, to do this and then to build on this to identify novel compounds that we can investigate, which potentially we can use in the wider human population to reduce sugar intake. And then building on this with regards to real world behaviors, moving away from mechanisms, we're in the process of building the Choices cohort and biobank and working with colleagues at the NLab in Nottingham and major supermarkets and retailers in the UK to build a cohort where we can look at real world purchasing behaviors. So this came from the work we were doing with the human genetics, which was primarily, as many of you will probably know, large cohorts typically collect food frequency questionnaires, which asks people, what foods do you eat? How often do you eat them? And is based on memory. So people forget, people lie, people don't like to say that they eat lots of bad foods. And so this data it's well known that this data is unreliable. And what we're really interested in understanding is, do these genetic differences that we have, do they actually change not just the foods that we say we eat or the foods that we like, but does this translate into real world behaviors? So does this change the foods that we buy in a supermarket? Does it change the amount of sugary foods we buy when we do our grocery shopping? The amount of alcoholic drinks that we drink, etc. So we're really trying to build this cohort to collect historical supermarket data from club cards that people hold, to do very, very deep behavioral profiling of psychosocial factors, different eating behaviors, craving questionnaires, etc. And then alongside that, collecting all the biological samples that you'd typically find in a biobank so we can link these together. And this is just the acknowledgement section. So thank you to everyone who's been involved in this research at Nottingham, across the BRC, in Copenhagen, Italy, and the business school here as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peter Aldis, for very insightful presentations, and we really appreciate the depth of your research and also the clarity of your explanations throughout your slides. For your
My pleasure.
information,
Apologies if I ran over.
no worries, no worries, no worries. For your information, Dr. Peter, we have like more than 400 participants who join online and also hundreds who join on site on the main site. So that's really interesting numbers of participants who interested in your presentations today. And also now I will open the floor for questions. Participants, please use the raise hand feature or type your questions on the chat box, and I will invite you to ask your questions if you want to ask directly to Dr. Peter regarding his presentation topics today. And we will have approximately 20 minutes for these Q&A sessions. Or perhaps I will kick off these sessions by asking you, Dr. Peter, one like generic questions regarding processed and high calories foods. That's perhaps in many countries, including less developed countries and also developed countries, are getting cheaper and more accessible than a fresh one. So nutritious foods are really expensive right now, I reckon. So what do you think? What's on your thoughts? How can the health systems and governments in this case, or you may provide perspective from the UK perspectives to address this imbalance without placing additional burden on low income communities?
Yeah, thank you. So it's a very timely question and timely problem. More so, I think, in the last 4 or 5 years post-COVID, when certainly in the UK and I think globally across the world, the cost of living has gone up. Costs of foods, like you say, healthy, nutritious foods has increased. Supermarkets here have increased their prices drastically to cope with the increased costs that they're incurring, which have then been passed on to us as consumers. But as is the same everywhere, wages, salaries, etc., haven't risen at the same rate. So this was always a problem, was how can you get people to eat healthier foods when healthier foods are more expensive and less healthier, less nutritious foods are cheaper and more readily available. And I would say arguably this is now an even bigger problem in the last few years as cost of living has increased so high. And I to be honest, I don't know what the answer is, because you have to make these foods affordable for people, and and if they're not affordable, then, as I suggested in one of the earlier slides, all of these reasons that people eat the foods that they do when you're in a lower income community, lower income countries, lower socioeconomic status, all of these factors will drive you towards choosing cheaper, less nutritious foods. Ultimately, if you have a family, if you have kids, the main thing is feeding your kids and providing them with enough energy to get through the day. And whilst in an ideal world these foods would be healthier, it's very often the case that they're not, because that's not the primary concern. And so I'm not really sure what the solution is without huge financial commitment from the government to reduce the cost of these foods to make them more readily available to everybody. And we've seen with things like the sugar taxes, where governments and countries have tried to increase the price of high sugar, high calorie foods, etc. They don't work as well as we would have hoped they do. So So it's a very difficult thing to figure out, I think.
Yes, I do agree as well, Dr. Peter. It's a bit challenging though, both for the government itself to come up with the proper programs and policy. Okay, shall we continue, Dr. Peter, to the next questions on the chat box
Yeah, please.
from my colleagues, Dr. Angel, and she would like to ask your insights since she's also conducting research on the genetic of obesity, especially in Indonesia settings. So she's very interested in your work that you have presented just now. So could you please advise which questionnaire or other tools that considered valid and reliable for assessing food preference to reduce subjectivity?
Yes, so we have, so the UK Biobank have their own questionnaire, which is this 140 item food liking questionnaire. So this is 140 food items which you rank based on how much you like them. I think you need permission from the UK Biobank to use this, but as far as I'm aware, you can if you request it and get approval. We are also using something called the Leeds Food Preference Questionnaire. So this is a really nice model and food preference questionnaire developed at the University of Leeds. They have a web app now, so I think it's LFPQ, where you can go on and pictures of different foods pop up on the screen, and you have a sliding scale to rate which food you prefer. So we're using this. This has been validated over a decade now. They've done it in different populations, different ethnicities. They have so for the standard one, it comes with standard British foods that you might expect, but they also have a whole list of foods and pictures for these foods that they validated in other populations. So this is a really good one. And then we're also using things like the food craving questionnaire, trait and state. So these are and a couple of other questionnaires around preference for how much people prefer rich foods. So there's a number of very good questionnaires out there that are valid, they're reliable, and can really help understand preferences and behaviors associated with eating, not just I guess what we say we eat, which as you'll know is unreliable. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Dr. Angel, perhaps Dr. Peter responds your questions properly, or if you want to ask further, you may contact Dr. Peter if you don't mind, Dr. Peter,
No,
to explore a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone has any questions or is interested in discussing collaborations, etc., please feel free to reach out.
Yeah. Like one of my colleagues, Dr. Raina Susans, who will work with you in the upcoming. So she will be joining your team in the University of Nottingham. Or perhaps Dr. Susan, you have something to ask to your supervisor or other
Very
questions.
excited to have Raihana join us.
Yes, Raina is joining us. So I open also for the next questions. Okay, from colleagues also. Ibu Sylvia. So she's a nutritionist, by the way. So what do you think, Dr. Peter, about the problem of overnutrition due to sugar cravings, due to high consumptions of sweet drinks, and the internalizations of the culture of working from cafes, working from anywhere right now? That's a trending topic. So how can public health initiatives effectively encourage healthier foods choices without compromising cultural preferences? That's quite an interesting topic.
Yes, it is. So we it's interesting. We just had in the news yesterday in the UK that Starbucks and Costa have started pushing low sugar alternatives on their customers because the government are planning to crack down on calories in food in cafes. So it's clearly a problem that our government have recognized as something that needs tackling. And so the answer from the cafes was, now we're going to try and sell everyone low calorie alternatives. But you're right, it's a huge problem. I think one of the reasons I enjoy working on this topic so much is I have a terrible sweet tooth myself. I could eat cakes every day. So, and I know when I'm in a cafe, if I go to a cafe or I go to a bakery, I will always have something that I probably shouldn't eat. So it's definitely a problem, and I think again it comes back to the earlier question. I think the government have to incentivize these companies to stock and to sell healthier foods, because if we think that healthier foods are more expensive, and high calorie sweeter foods are cheaper. This is the same for businesses and cafes. So they will be buying cheaper pastries, cakes, foods that are not great, and then selling them for a lot more. So they will be making a lot more money selling these foods to their customers. So there's an obvious reason why they do it. It's a difficult problem, because at the same time, like you say, culturally, people like to go and work in cafes and have a coffee and a cake. It's a nice social thing to do. So it's trying to balance these things, doing these things in moderation, not eating these foods in excess, but also incentivizing cafes and restaurants and places to have healthier foods on offer. I hope that answers the question. Oh, sorry, I can't hear you.
Yes, sorry. Ibu Sylvie, perhaps you can get points from Dr. Peter answers and explanations. All right, so we still have minutes to go. So I will open another questions again from the participants, from students also. You may ask some questions. From colleagues? No? Okay. Okay, one more questions perhaps. I will read the questions from one of the participants regarding the urbanizations, Dr. Peter. So obviously urbanizations is changing how people shop, how people cook, and how people eat as well. So from your experience, your personal experience perhaps, how does the shift towards fast and convenience foods relate to obesity trends globally? And what do you think the community-based interventions that can counter this matter?
Yeah, so urbanization has definitely been a huge driver, and this convenience, this ease of accessing cheap, calorie dense foods is really a huge problem. But at the same time, convenience. I feel like as a world, everybody is increasingly busy. everybody is getting busier and busier and busier and looking for any shortcut in their life that can save them some time in the day. And often this comes at the expense of cooking healthier foods. I have some good Italian and Spanish friends, and they still spend a lot of time in the kitchen in the evenings because culturally cooking is something that is important to them. They make lots of home cooked meals. They spend time with their family and friends around the dinner tables. And in other parts of the world, it's been gradually over the years, faster and faster, moving away from that to just cooking something as quick as you can, ready-made, refined meals, just to save as much time as you can. If you add on to that the fact that buying these fresh ingredients is now more and more expensive, it's really a melting pot of problems that urbanization, cost of living, convenience, like I say, the fact that everybody is just getting busier and busier. I'm sure it's the same for all of you. That if there is a way to save some time in the day, people are tending to take it. I don't know what the solution is, to be honest. I feel like they're all of these questions, all of these problems are all connected, but none of them have an easy answer or an easy fix. It's almost certainly, wholesale change as a society across the world, across nations, which, is arguably even harder than population level interventions. So
yeah, that's true. That's true, Dr. Peter. So that's the reasons why the positions of research is more important, to provide evidence-based recommendations to develop proper interventions.
Absolutely, and I think as time goes on, really engaging with moving from individual disciplines where maybe historically somebody just worked in nutrition and somebody just worked in psychology or sociology, and really moving more towards multidisciplinary teams and projects that span these disciplines, understanding psychosocial barriers and behaviors, and really I would really encourage working across disciplines with your colleagues, looking for opportunities where maybe something hasn't been done. Because the only way to do this is to try something different, I think.
Exactly, agree. So it's a interprofessional collaborations indeed. All right, Dr. Peter, I guess the Q&A sessions, nobody's would like to ask questions. So perhaps we can close the sessions now. So thank you very much, Dr. Peter Aldis, for your very excellent presentation and also for your engaging with all these questions. So perhaps your insights have been very valuable and have thoroughly inspired our participants today. So thank you so much, Peter Aldis.
Thank you very much.
Yes, no worries. On behalf of the organizing committee of the 6th Jambi Medicine and Health Science International Conference, Jamhesic, I would like to thank all participants for your active engagement in this session. But before we conclude, on behalf of the organizing committee of today's conference, perhaps we will present you a certificate of appreciations for your valuable contributions to today's plenary sessions. Perhaps Mungkin panitia bisa show the certificate of appreciations to Dr. Peter Aldis on Zoom.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Peter. Thank you. So this concludes our fourth plenary sessions. We will now move on to the next plenary, or perhaps tomorrow, because this is the last sessions for today. And thank you for Dr. Peter Adis. Have a good day. Thank you for all for joining us today. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon and good morning to Dr. Adis. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you to our moderator and Peter Aldis, Doctor of Philosophy. And we will now conduct a symbolic appreciations that have been requested by our moderator. And the next sessions is the appreciations for our moderator too. And please the committee to share screen. Okay, this is the certificate of appreciation for our moderator. And you can give us a smile for our virtual photo sessions. Okay, we can count down in 3, 2, 1. Okay, once again. And in 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you. Our moderator.
Thank you. Terima kasih. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye. Assalamualaikum.
Okay, thank you very much to the moderator and Mr. Pistol, Dr. Peter Aldis, Doctor of Philosophy, for a very enlightening final plenary lecture section for today. Ladies and gentlemen, with the conclusion of this lecture, the sessions in the main hall for day 1 have officially ended. We extend our deepest gratitude for your active participation and enthusiasm throughout the first day of the 6th Jambi Medicine and Health Science International Conference.
And we invite you all to join us again tomorrow on Wednesday, November 12th on 2025 for our exciting Day 2 program, which will commence promptly at 8 with plenary lecture 5. And I'm Davina Alzate Salonika.
And I'm Ferry Jonathan Mulanagabe.
Thank you for your participation and
Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. FKIK Unja, mengakar kuat dan unggul.
Iya. Yes.